I got big plans to set up a gold mine and run it my way. We do have a 1,000-ounce goal. This is a big gamble, so me and Faith have to make this work.
Two gold mining empires were on a collision course. Kevin Beets, son of the legendary Tony Beets, was striking out on his own, only to be stopped by a single missing piece of steel. Parker Schnabel, Tony's biggest rival, held the key.
Those are 11 grand.
11 grand is a good deal for that one.
You don't need to pay for anything now. You start a tab.
Appreciate that, really do.
I'm more than happy. I know how hard it is when you're first starting out.
That's awesome.
Their meeting wouldn't just solve a small problem, it would ignite a partnership that would shatter all expectations. A dream on the brink. Kevin Beets had a massive goal, 1,000 ounces of gold. This was his year to step out from his father's long shadow and prove he could run his own gold mine. Along with his wife, Faith, he poured every penny they had into leasing the Scribner Creek claim from his dad, Tony. It was a huge gamble.
I got big plans to set up a gold mine and run it my way. We do have a 1,000-ounce goal.
The plan was clear. Get in, strip the useless dirt, and start sluicing for gold as fast as possible. Right out of the gate, problems started stacking up. The equipment Kevin borrowed from Tony was old, worn, and in desperate need of repair. A couple of crucial airlines on one machine were already broken, which was a terrible start to his morning.
We have a couple of the airlines, those have broken off, so it's not a great start to my morning.
Kevin knew that using his dad's gear was a double-edged sword. Tony's way of fixing things was very different from how Kevin wanted to run his operation. Still, he had to start somewhere. To help him, he brought in a secret weapon. Brendan Rule, a master earth mover who used to work for the one and only Parker Schnabel's.
I'm back up in the Yukon here. I'm going to be a foreman, and I really want to do good for Kevin and Faith.
Brendan's arrival was a huge boost. After a tense 6 years and an explosive end to his time with Parker's crew, he was back, ready to move dirt.
I don't know if guys are in a rush to go home or whatever, but if anybody wants to go home, they can go home right now.
He knew the area well. Parker's old claim was just on the other side of the trees. The stars felt like they were aligning. Kevin showed him the 44-acre claim, pointing out the 11-acre Lynx cut where they planned to start. The ground was promising, with drill holes showing about 15 to 20 feet of muck on top of the pay dirt.
Based on what drill holes that Tony had and the little bit of poking around I did, between 15, 20 feet of muck on top.
The race was on. They needed to be sluicing within 4 weeks. The first step was to rip the frozen ground with a big dozer. As the D10 dozer, a machine as old as the sun, was dropped off. A gut-wrenching problem appeared. The ripper shank, the massive 10-foot claw of steel needed to tear into the permafrost, was missing. A dozer without a ripper shank is like a truck without tires. It was completely useless. Their plans came to a dead stop. Without that single piece of steel, they were dead in the water, and the short Klondike mining season was already ticking away.
I know Tony didn't want to give me his best equipment, but I mean, a dozer without a ripper is like a truck without tires.
Without it, we're dead in the water.
Every second they waited was money burning and their dream of 1,000 ounces slipping further from their grasp. Panic set in. The ripper shank was the first and most important piece of the entire puzzle. Without it, there would be no mining. Kevin and Brennan knew Tony wouldn't be much help, so they were on their own. The pressure was immense. Brennan, having worked in the area for years, had an idea. It was a long shot, a truly wild idea that made Kevin's stomach churn. There was one person who definitely had a spare ripper shank for a D10 dozer. The problem was that person was Parker Schnabel. The history between Parker and the Beets family was rocky, to say the least. For the last decade, Kevin had only ever seen Parker in passing, usually when he was arguing with Tony. Those meetings were never in a good mood.
I've only ever seen him in passing, really, the last decade, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or when he had to come talk to Tony, so he wasn't always in the best mood.
Uh-oh.
The thought of going to him, hat in hand, was tough to swallow. But what choice did they have? They were desperate. With a heavy heart, Kevin agreed. He and Brennan got in their truck and drove the 3 miles to Parker's new claim on Dominion Creek. The air was thick with tension as they pulled up. Parker looked up, surprised to see Kevin and even more surprised to see his old foreman, Brennan. For a few years, the two hadn't spoken after their big falling out. Parker walked over, a curious look on his face. After a moment of awkward silence, Kevin explained the situation. He had a dozer but no ripper shank. Parker's first question cut right to the point. He wanted to know if Tony was involved. Kevin explained that this was his and Faith's operation, that they had gone out on their own.
We have a dozer without a ripper shank. So hopefully you have one you're willing to part with.
Tony needs a ripper shank?
Oh no, me and Faith this year have gone out on our own. So we're borrowing a dozer from Tony without a ripper shank.
The moment Parker heard that Tony was not part of the new venture, his entire attitude changed. A look of respect and maybe even relief washed over his face. He understood how hard it is to start out on your own. He told Kevin he had a shank for him. The part was worth $11,000, a massive cost for a new operation, but Parker offered it to him on credit. No money down, just start a tab.
Those are 11 grand.
11 grand is a good deal for that one.
You don't need to pay for anything now. You start a tab.
Appreciate that, really do.
I'm more than happy. I know how hard it is when you're first starting out.
That's awesome.
It was an incredible gesture of goodwill. The tension finally broke. Parker even said Brennan should come by for a beer sometime, a sign that old wounds could heal. This was a huge win. As they loaded up the vital piece of steel, Kevin felt a massive weight lift off his shoulders. They could finally start mining. Now, with Parker's help, they could finally attack the frozen earth of Scribner Creek, but they had no idea the ground itself was waiting to fight back. Back at Scribner Creek, with the new ripper shank attached to the dozer, a wave of optimism washed over the small crew. It was time to get to work. Brennan jumped in the D10 and slammed the ripper into the ground, but the ground didn't give way easily. Scribner Creek wasn't just any claim, it held a dark reputation among Klondike old-timers. They didn't call it Scribner, they called it the Sleeper because it had a nasty habit of swallowing operations whole, putting them to sleep for good. The specific area Kevin wanted to mine, the Lynx Cut, was even more notorious. It was a teardrop-shaped patch of land, cut off from the main valley by 2 forks of the creek that wrapped around it, creating what locals called the Forsaken Isle. For generations, miners had tried and failed to tame it. The ground was uniquely treacherous, peppered with strange, dense pockets of fog that would roll in without warning, even on clear days, disorienting anyone working there.
A little bit scary, but you know what? I'm confident we're gonna make it. See if I can walk as well as I talk.
Legend said the island was protected by something ancient, that the ground itself didn't want to give up its gold. Kevin and Brennan were about to find out those legends had some truth to them. The dozer roared, but the permafrost was like concrete, far harder than the drill log suggested. It was filled with enormous hidden boulders that jarred the machine violently. The D10, already an old machine, was being pushed to its absolute limit, burning through diesel at an alarming rate. The initial plan of stripping 3 acres in a few weeks was quickly turning into a joke. Days turned into a week, then 2. They had barely scratched the surface of the thick, mucky overburden. Every inch they gained cost them a fortune in fuel and time. The short 4-month mining season was slipping through their fingers like sand. The 1,000-ounce goal felt like a distant dream. Faith watched the fuel bills pile up, her worry growing with each passing day. The optimism they felt after getting the ripper shank was gone, replaced by the cold, hard reality of their situation. The Forsaken Isle was living up to its name, and it felt like it was actively trying to break them. They were in a war against the earth itself, and they were losing badly, bleeding money and hope with every passing hour. The breaking point. The struggle continued. Weeks of relentless work had yielded almost nothing. They had moved a mountain of dirt, but it was all worthless overburden. They were nowhere near the gold-rich gravel below. The crew was exhausted, the equipment was breaking down, and the dream was turning into a nightmare. Kevin was at his breaking point. The weight of his life savings, the trust of his wife, and the promise he made to his crew were crushing him. He was starting to think the old-timers were right. Scribner Creek was a curse. The atmosphere at the mine was grim. The initial excitement was replaced with quiet desperation. Brennan pushed the machines as hard as he could, but even his expert skills couldn't cheat the brutal reality of the ground. They were spending thousands of dollars a day just to spin their wheels. The math wasn't working. At this rate, they would be broke long before they ever saw their first flake of gold. It felt like failure was not just possible, but inevitable. Just as Kevin was contemplating the gut-wrenching decision to shut it all down, a truck rolled up the muddy access road. It was Parker Schnabel. He wasn't there for a casual beer or to check on his ripper shank. He had heard through the Klondike grapevine that Kevin's operation was in serious trouble. He got out of his truck and surveyed the scene. The exhausted crew, the struggling dozer, and the pathetically small area of stripped ground. He saw the desperation in Kevin's eyes. Parker walked the cut, kicking at the frozen dirt. He saw the massive boulders they had pulled out and understood the scale of the problem. This wasn't a job for a single aging D10. This ground required an army of iron. He listened as Kevin explained their burn rate, their lack of progress, and their fading hopes. Parker didn't offer sympathy or simple advice. He saw a bigger picture, a huge opportunity buried under all that mud and frustration.
Well, thank you very much, Parker.
no worries.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm happy to help. Good to see you guys.
Same.
Best of luck.
Better give you a hug, old timer.
He looked at Kevin, then at the unconquered ground of the Forsaken Isle, and a plan began to form in his mind. A plan so ambitious it would either save Kevin's season or create the biggest disaster the Klondike had ever seen. Parker didn't waste any time. He laid out a proposal that was both shocking and brilliant. He told Kevin that he was fighting a losing battle. The ground was too tough for his small-scale operation, but it wasn't too tough for Parker's fleet of massive machinery. He proposed a joint venture, an alliance that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks prior. Parker would bring in his crew, his rock trucks, his massive excavators, and his legendary wash plant Slucifer to attack the Forsaken Isle. Here was the deal. Parker's operation would take over the heavy lifting, stripping the ground, and running the pay dirt. In return, they would split the gold. But Parker added a crucial, incredibly generous condition. The 50-50 split would only begin after Kevin had reached his initial 1,000-ounce goal. That first 1,000 ounces would be all Kevin's, allowing him to pay back his investment, cover his costs, and prove to everyone, especially himself, that he could hit his target. It was an offer of a lifetime. Parker was essentially risking his own time, fuel, and equipment to help his rival son get on his feet first. For Kevin, it was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. He looked at Brennan, who nodded with wide eyes. This was their only way out. To say no would be to accept failure. To say yes would mean teaming up with his father's biggest competitor, but it also meant a real chance at success. The decision was easy. Kevin shook Parker's hand, and in that moment, the most powerful and unexpected partnership in the Klondike was born. The news spread like wildfire. Parker Schnabel was moving his entire operation to Scribner Creek. His crew was pulled from Dominion Creek and redirected. The logistics were a nightmare, but the goal was clear: unleash the full might of an industrial-scale mining operation on the cursed ground that had nearly broken Kevin Beets. The race was on to move Big Red and Slucifer, a logistical feat that would take days and cost a fortune.
Well, I'm excited you guys got such a nice wash plant. We should be able to make up for some lost time with this if we can run 23 hours a day at least.
The gamble was now bigger than ever, with 2 operations and millions of dollars on the line, all focused on a piece of ground that had defeated every miner who dared to touch it. The arrival of Parker's crew transformed the Forsaken Isle overnight. The quiet, desperate mine site became a thundering hive of activity. Giant rock trucks, big excavators, and a fleet of dozers descended upon the claim. The ground that had fought Kevin's single D10 for weeks stood no chance against this new army of iron. The earth trembled as Parker's team went to work with brutal efficiency. Brennan Rule was back in his element, working alongside his old crewmates, directing the symphony of destruction. The pace was frantic, a stark contrast to the slow, grinding progress of the previous weeks. They were no longer just scratching the surface. They were tearing the heart out of the island. Huge excavators ripped into the permafrost, pulling out boulders the size of cars and dumping them into massive rock trucks. They moved thousands of cubic yards of dirt every single day, a volume Kevin could have only dreamed of. The centerpiece of the new operation was Slucifer, Parker's legendary wash plant. Moving the beast was a monumental task, but once it was set up and running, it was a game changer. It could process hundreds of yards of pay dirt an hour, swallowing everything the excavators could feed it. The cursed ground of Scribner Creek was finally being tamed, not by fighting it, but by overwhelming it with pure raw power. They turned a cursed claim into a river of gold. Like and subscribe for more. But was this Kevin's greatest success, or did he just sell his dream to the highest bidder?